I'm Ryan, and one of the owners here, and we opened um, January of 2005, and a friend was working at the Clinton Street Pub back when it opened at 7 a.m. For a happy hour for the old timers, and it was for sale, and they wanted too much for it, and a friend of ours was sitting there. Well, he wasn't. He was kind of a friend. We kind of knew him, but that's that's for later. He had this spot on Alberta as kind of an internet cafe, kind of a theater space, and he told us that we should put a bar in it, and so we just kind of talked about it for a couple days, and then decided to scrape some money together. So yeah, we opened 2005, and then I was doing the booking for a little while, but didn't go so well. We had another guy named Seth, and then
yeah, I'm doing the booking here currently, and my name is David. So that's my primary function here, is helping to maintain the calendar and curate shows for the bands that are coming through, and that's been since like spring of 2010. So I'm one of the new guys, only 6 years. Yeah. 6 notches in the belt. There's not a lot of turnover here. Yeah. You can probably imagine. I mean, Stowe's still working the bar, 4 or 5 days a week as one of the original owners. So it's a pretty tight-knit crew we've kind of got put together.
Yeah. Most of the bartenders have been here since they were customers when we first opened, and they're still here, which is really good.
The room that we're in right now is the venue area for the No, and it was the No was originally set up as a micro theater and pub, so this was kind of like a video screening area, but with a lot of the connections that Stowe and a bunch of our staff have, all of whom are musicians or like very much tied into the music community. Maybe they run a record label, or we're putting out zines. I mean, like Defector was loosely based out of here, and Poison Apple Records, the former booker Seth, and one of our bartenders, Shannon, had that record label going out of here. Derek, who's still bartending here, he's played in bands that have toured the world relentlessly, and so despite being kind of initially set up as a micro theater, it kind of had these large booth style seating, more akin to a theater, and then with all of these musicians kind of working here and these people that were invested in music, when their friends would be coming through town, it just kind of, Stowe would like hook them up with a show, or Derek would hook them up with a show, and because the room was not necessarily being used every night for film stuff, it kind of started to evolve into like, oh, your band can play here. Starting initially with just like word of mouth through the employees and the ownership.
Yeah. The first one was Matt Ward was the first. He called me up and he's like, hey, we want to try out the live set, and I heard you just opened a place, and it was like, sure. And it was totally just word of mouth kind of thing, but then it just kind of went from there.
Yeah, and so at this point, the venue seldom functions in like a theater role, but the live performances have become, frequent enough where we're doing, during the height of the touring season or summer months, probably 25 shows in 30 days. Oh, yeah. And 90% of those are featuring an out-of-town act, and that's kind of just was the natural progression of the venue throughout the years, from kind of like friends come in and do their thing and set up the show and are left to their own amends, to where now we have kind of a financial responsibility to these touring bands, and we want to facilitate them having good tours. So it's a slightly more controlled, but still with like its heart is in that DIY realm, and so the reputation of the place is as kind of like a punk dive that you can play, where, you know, the staff have a common interest with you and a common end goal to get you set up, both with, you know, drinks and good door payment and no holier than thou like attitudes from sound people and stuff like that. And it's just made this place immensely popular with bands who want to do the music that's a little bit off the mainstream radar.
Yeah, and everybody that runs the sound, they all play in bands too, so they know how to treat everybody.
Yeah, it's easy. It's easy to, you know, you'll hear it about other venues, the things that bands don't like when they play other venues, and that's one of the things that, you know, our venue staff, who kind of double as the sound staff, are all playing around town, around the country, internationally, and so when they have an opportunity to kind of control the environment and the setting that a band plays in, it's really easy for them to go into their kind of catalog of memories and be like, oh, when that sound guy said this to me through the monitors, it really bummed me out, or it really pissed me off. And
this is
so
how I'd like to be treated.
Yeah, exactly. And so you just end up with, it's more of like a camaraderie with the performers that end up being here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we're coming up on this building sold last summer for a lot of money. And so slowly the other tenants have been moving out, and we have our lease through the end of this year and hope to stay for another 3 years. We have a 3-year option, but with everything changing so much, it doesn't sound like the new landlord really cares too much about a punk rock venue. And so if we use our 3-year option, then the rent's going to most likely go through the roof. And we might be looking for another space this year, but hopefully, you know, we love this space, but so hopefully 3 more years. But
I'll say on that note, to kind of paint a picture for people who aren't in the neighborhood, or just like aren't in Portland and are unfamiliar, when Ryan and the original cast of characters went in on this place to make it what it is today, the No, this neighborhood was basically boarded up windows. There were a sprinkling of businesses along the basically the 35-ish blocks that comprise the quote-unquote Alberta Arts District, which wasn't even a term at the time. I mean, this neighborhood was really rough and tumble. It had it was a very affordable neighborhood, and that's where a lot of our original clientele came from, and kind of the aesthetic of this place caters to. It's not pretentious. It's not super glistening. But it was down to earth, and it ended up with a lot of down to earth and like punk rocker clientele, because, you know, they could be themselves in this environment. Up here, was probably close to their homes at the time, and more than just like this block selling, this neighborhood has sold. The whole neighborhood is like this gentrified mess, with all the actual like artistic spirit that was up here having been ripped out by the developers. Because as they came in, started building these, you know, multi-use buildings, which are basically just condos with some retail space stuffed underneath them. They're driving up the housing costs, be it rent or own. People, like some of our oldest or longest standing, not oldest as an age, but longest standing patrons that were smart enough to like buy homes back in the day, are in a really good spot because they cost nothing, because the neighborhood had like gang activity, not great public transportation at the
Yeah.
time. And anyway, as like the developers kind of got in here, the hippies and the punks and the like derelict weirdos, you know, the livability of this neighborhood kind of went out the window for them. And that's more so than just this place. This whole neighborhood has like lost its kind of core participants
Yeah.
in the stuff that made it the arts district.
Yeah.
And that happens in city after city. You know, artists and, you know, druggies and punks and hippies gravitate toward these sketchy neighborhoods, infuse a little bit of life and culture into them, be it like one like kind of shitty or shoddy put together art gallery or like a event space like the No. And next thing you know, it draws a little bit of attention, and then you know, Tin Shed opens up and brings the breakfast crowd here on the weekends, and then another business opens up, and all of a sudden it starts to be this neighborhood you can kind of stroll through versus, you know,
The brunch.
roll up your windows and drive as fast as you can or whatever. And I think we're the last business on the street that puts boards on our windows overnight because they used to get busted or tagged. You can comment more on, you know, the ridiculousness of how it used to be.
Well, yeah, I mean, there was a field right across the street from where we are, and now it's a, you know, big monstrosity. Actually, the same guy that bought our current landlord built that, and there just used to be a couch in the middle of the field, and you go sit out there and stare at the stars, and
probably weren't just staring at the stars.
No, probably not. People would pass out over there, but yeah, I mean, this is happening all over town. It's just, I've been here, it'll be 18 years on Monday, and it's just the last like 3 years that everything's just changed exponentially, you know, and it's still going. I mean, it's going to keep going. But.
Well, I mean, the city's trying to eliminate like municipal debt by approving every single development project without consideration for what it's replacing or where it's going in. They just see the number. I mean, there was something like 40,000 people moved here last year, all of which are probably from California. And, you know, I mean, that's not true, the last half of that. But 40,000 people moved here last year, and according to statistics, they're trying to make room for all these people. But these people, the charm that they kind of saw when deciding on Portland as a place to move, or they're moving here for the mere economy of it because they've been priced out of the Bay Area or Los Angeles or these other highly gentrified areas. They're coming up here with a different eye as to what makes this place special. And with an influx of that many people at one time, I mean, that almost matches, I mean, it's like a 10% increase. And, you know, you figure that's been happening for the past 10 years.
Yeah.
And so the people who kind of established the, I don't know, like the accoutrements that drew people to Portland are now outnumbered by people who don't have a firm root here. I mean, truth of the matter is both Stowe and I are transplants to this city as well. But I feel like maybe, much like, you know, like camping rules, like leave no trace, you know, where you don't let your presence, you know, I feel like maybe we have more of that perspective on, like we liked it the way it was. We didn't come here trying to change it just to appreciate, you know, how kind of ramshackled together it was and how affordable, sure, it was. I mean, that was definitely a perk.
Yeah. I mean, if I came through here a couple times with the band and just fell in love with it, and I think if I came through right now for the first time, I don't know if I would fall in love with it with the way it is now. I mean, I still love Portland. I'm not going anywhere, but taking some getting used to. Yeah.
I feel stuck now versus, you know, the exploration process is over and all the new things that are happening are depress the shit out of me. I
make
don't
the best of
connect
it.
to 'em. Yeah.
We're making the best of it here.
Oh, one more story about that field. When the structure, the condo fortress retail space thing that went up across the street was scheduled to be put up, they put this huge chain link fence around the field. And in the middle of the field, where the couch that Stowe mentioned used to be, which was kind of just like this community field, and it really was not even much of a field. It was like a dirt lot.
Yeah, yeah.
And there was very little like vegetation.
Yeah.
It was just dirt and mud in the winter, really.
Uh-huh.
And they put up this ginormous billboard thing with like, coming soon, like this, and then this awful depiction of, happy people on like a freshly paved sidewalk out front of this like, tower of crap, and with crap businesses in the bottom, and people that we may or may not know or may not work here took the entire image that was on that billboard and like peeled it off, and it ended up at a house venue not far from here in their basement as like the backdrop to where bands would play. And I mean, I'm sure that sign cost a lot of money to print, since it was maybe like 8 feet by 10 feet or something.
But it went to a good home.
It went to a good home, yeah. And then they put another one up, and somebody just spray painted "No Thanks" over the entire thing in like red spray paint, which was awesome. So I feel like, that was kind of a weak, but nonetheless a stand from the community, just repeatedly saying like, no, like we don't want this stuff here. But the city has and the developers, everybody's got a hand in the pocket of somebody else trying to pull some change out, and except the people that actually have to like live through it.
Yeah.
We did not come from California first.
It seems like there's a lot of kids moving here, like being here and bartending and seeing a lot. I'm checking IDs. Most of them aren't Oregon IDs, but I see a lot of kids that are moving here that are in bands, artists. That makes me really happy to see, and they do have a hard time, finding places to rent. Living is hard to come by here right now. But if I didn't work here and I wasn't around that environment, I would think too much about all the tech coming in, and it being pretty much all tech people.
Well, I mean, downtown we saw Pinterest just moved down there, and Airbnb. Uber was trying to get like some sort of national-ish headquarters here, right, which would have been downtown. And I think they're calling, Silicon Valley, California, that massive gentrification process with the tech boom and the startups, and now they're calling Portland and Seattle the Silicon Forest, because those basically the amount of capital that you need to survive in those places where the startups kind of began springing up like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, that like, I guess, early 2000s boom of kind of app entrepreneurs and things like that. You can't really get the capital to do that again with the cost of living the way it is there.
Yeah.
So these people who have been working for these successful startups that want to do their own now are branching out, bringing those new businesses up here with them for the affordability. And I think that there's also, don't quote me on this, but I believe that there's maybe tax incentives for that have been put in place. Again, getting back to like the Portland and the state of Oregon, like desperately trying to eliminate debt. When you offer tax incentive to businesses, I mean, it's similar to like, I think Detroit's doing that for movies. Right?
Yeah.
It's like way cheaper to film a movie in Detroit than any place else. They're trying to attract economy, and the Northwest is kind of, or the Northwest politicians are kind of doing that. So this, maybe, the older transplants, getting back to your original question, because they weren't attracted to any tax write-off or even necessarily, like, I mean, the way that, Ryan had just, recanted the story of how the No opened, which was kind of on a whim.
Yeah.
And with next to nothing as
Yeah.
far as finances go. Now that it's become the new generation of people, or generations of people coming here, understand that it's not like a whimsical, like, oh, let's open a bar because it only is going to cost us like $3,000 and there's 3 of us, which is only $1,000 each.
Yeah.
And, you know, like I'm getting a pretty good tax return this year because I didn't make enough money, so they're giving me all my taxes back and I'll use it to start this business. I mean, that's not the game anymore. Now it's like $50,000 would be like a bare minimum for opening up a business here. So you got to figure that the people who are coming here with that sort of money, with those ideas, even if it's an artistic-minded person, that type of capital ownership means that maybe these people are a little bit more cutthroat and less interested in, you know, just keeping things the way they are because it's so easy to kind of outbid somebody who opened a business for $3,000 and isn't, you know, raking in money hand over fist necessarily.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's like kind of speculative. I'm not a economist or a politician, and I try to avoid both of those types of people. You know, with the whole venues closing thing, I spoke to some other folks about this recently, and again, with the shift of people here, I was really disheartened to see like-minded. I think that's the thing that people are missing. Is venues similar to the No or like the No are closing. In their place are springing up new venues. Revolution Hall, Mississippi Studios, the Liquor Store. What's another one? I mean, those, let's say there's East End, Slabtown, and Habesha, you know? Those are the ones that close, East End, Slabtown, Habesha. And those type of venues were willing to do the same type of music that places like The No and High Water Mark and Twilight are willing to do. Whereas the stuff that's replacing it, Revolution Hall, Mississippi Studios, the Liquor Store, or, you know, stuff like that, is catering to a different clientele. They're not into like harsh, abrasive, loud, fast music. It's more tuned back to, I guess, the old popular stuff in Portland, which was the indie scene, or just kind of this less aggro music. And there's nothing wrong with that necessarily either, but I think it's a reflection of the whole city changing. So people talk about like this venue apocalypse that happened, and I'm like, well, kind of, sort of. It really affected like this small demographic in the grand scheme of music. You know, the bands that we're dealing with here, or that the East End was dealing with, or that Slabtown was dealing with, aren't, you know, getting 8-star reviews on Pitchfork, and that's what most people are consuming as their indie media source, you know. And that publication, or whatever it is, isn't even a publication, it's just like an online thing. You know, it's garbage, and it doesn't really convey the bigger picture of how much music is actually happening, but it's easily digested for most people. So with most people now kind of moving here or catching wind that Portland's like a cool place to be, I think the venues are catching on to that model, or following predecessors like the Doug Fur's model, who have been wildly successful, and like, all due respect to them, they have a great sounding room. And I kind of feel like Mississippi Studios is like the northeast version of Doug Fur, and I'm not unhappy that it exists. I can't say that I'm particularly excited about all of their programming, almost none of it really.
Yeah, I don't recognize any of that.
But I don't think what they're doing is bad, as far as like, I mean, if you're facilitating music happening, good on you. And if this is what the kids, you know, like want to be doing, if they want to be making like mellow indie rock, which they do apparently, because, you know, it seems like the younger of artists I seem to be working with lately, booking shows, the less agitated and frustrated their music sounds to me, which is keeps kind of rocking my world. I'm like, man, if I could go back 10 years and hell, like I'm, 32 years old and I'm angrier than this 22-year-old about stuff. Like that is an issue for me.
Yeah.
And it makes me sad. And at the same time, I'm like, there's absolutely no reason to not give this person an opportunity to share their music that they've been working on with their friends to other people. That's why they wrote it, and it means something to them. But I don't know, maybe assessing where the complacency comes from. We're not losing venues. We're just getting we're just getting different music, or yes, we are both losing venues, and we're, maybe losing some of the sounds that made this the city poignant in the minds of other people who were interested in underground garage rock and punk and hardcore punk and these like noisy subgenres. So maybe a little bit of that is waning and can't support the amount of venues, but as far as our booking, it really hasn't changed too drastically. I mean, prior to the closing of those kind of iconic other punk venues, we're inundated with more requests than we can possibly help with, which is a little bit disheartening. And so, of course, with those venues closing, makes it even harder. But there have been a few alternatives that have sprung up in their place, like High Water Mark, and like Twilight got like a big revitalization with Jimmy, and yeah.
One of the coolest things was I was getting ready to open had just opened the bar, and my friend Adam walked in, and he hadn't been in a while, and we were talking, and he's like, "Oh, my friend here's in town. He's playing another show, but he wanted to play kind of a dive bar, so I brought him here." And this guy was looking around. He's like, "Oh yeah, I think I'd like to play here." And then I was like, "Oh yeah, what's your band and stuff like that?" He's like, "Oh, I'm Jonathan Richman," and I was like, "Oh yeah, of course." And our friend Seth, that was doing the booking at the time, happened to be sitting at the bar, and I went over and I said, "Oh, hey Seth, this is Jonathan Richman. He wants to play here." And Seth kind of went, "What?" And so we did 2 nights the first time, and then
you did 2 years later.
Yeah,
he asked to come back again, and we did 3 consecutive nights.
We did 3 nights,
and both times were awesome, like really, really awesome.
Yeah, and the only time we've ever had pre-sale tickets. And
which sold out in like 20 minutes or something for 2 nights, right during like a day shift with you. Like, or there was a line. We had it so that it was like the first time it went on sale on like a Wednesday at 8 p.m. and they were gone by that night.
Yeah, yeah. And it was pretty much word of mouth. I think we had it on our website, but
yeah, we don't really have like an advertising budget or anything. So, I mean, we're still putting up flyers and paper handbills, handing them out for shows that we have here, which is kind of a dying breed in that capacity. I guess I'll do another. The Jonathan Richman stuff was both of his stints here. His first stint was like my first nights working here. Mm-hmm. That spring of 2010 appearance, and then in 2012, getting to host him again for 3 nights. There was a really special moment on the third day, which was a Sunday. There was because he had kind of come in and done all of his sound check the days prior. He was super late. He just like didn't show up at regular, check-in time, and then it was maybe like 9:10, and he was supposed to have started at 9. He still wasn't here. But his drummer was kicking around and is like, "Oh yeah, he's gonna be here real soon. He doesn't need to do a sound check or anything tonight." And there was like everybody who had a ticket had already come inside and was standing in the venue because they're like, "Okay, he's supposed to be playing any time now. He must just be about to like come out from the back." Little did they realize like he wasn't even here yet. And then we had done, I think, like X amount of pre-sale tickets, and then we had like 25 spots available day of for like $2 more or something than the ticket price. So from like $10 to $12. Wow, you know. And those tickets had already been sold as well. So we were at capacity and we weren't letting any more people in. There were about 10 people waiting outside in hopes that someone would leave or like need to leave for some reason and they could get in. And as Jonathan was coming up, I was outside, pacing nervously, wondering where he was at. And he's like, "Oh, hey, David," and I'm like, "Oh, you're here, great." And I was like, "Well, everybody's waiting for you inside." And he's like, "Oh, sorry, I'm late." He's like, "I'll just get right on stage and do my thing." I'm like, "Oh, no worries, man." And meanwhile, I'm like sweating bullets, Anyway, then he notices the people standing outside, and he's like, "Why are these people standing outside?" And I was like, "Oh, well, we only had the small batch of tickets available day of, so." These people are waiting in hopes of getting in if somebody has to leave, but in all likelihood, they're not going to be able to because we're at capacity. And he's like, "Oh, well, that's terrible." And it's November or thereabouts, and it's cold, really cold. You can see your breath, and they're standing, kind of huddled, these 10 people against the wall waiting to get in. And he's like, "Well, if you don't mind, I'd like to give them something before I leave." And he walks over and puts down his guitar case in front of these people, busts it open, and he's like, "I heard that you guys might not be able to get into the show, and so I thought I'd do a couple songs for you out here. So really cool. In case you can't hear it well from, the music from inside." And he just starts playing a song, and then he starts dancing with his guitar, and he's doing these little numbers, and there's only like these 10 people who are waiting for the show, and like maybe me and like 3 other people standing outside, maybe finishing cigarettes and stuff like that. And there's literally 100+ people inside, packed at the stage edge, waiting for him to come on stage, not realizing that this like amazing kind of he did kind of like an overture of several of his songs, like kind of quick little like vignettes of each song. And he like grabbed one of the people that was standing in line and was like dancing with her and stuff. And I just couldn't believe, like, there are so many performers of his stature that would be doing vocal warm-up exercises, very concerned about singing in the cold like that. And I mean, he just didn't give a fuck whatsoever. His only concern was just that these people saw Jonathan Richman if they were waiting in the cold that night to see Jonathan Richman. And that was like a really humbling experience to see a performer. And then it makes sense, the longevity of his career, because if you're that type of person, I mean, that's who we all do this for, Those are the type of people. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll quickly say that the mob from the UK came here. And that was pretty unbelievable. This was pre-fire marshal days, meaning like nobody cared what happened on the street. It was kind of right at the cusp of the gentrification and all the building development. But we basically were left alone up here, and so like rules were pretty much out the window. And when 200+ punks came to see this legendary peace punk, post punk UK band that are all in their like late 40s to mid 50s at this point, and they get up there and they play their kind of quintessential record pretty much back to front with some new songs thrown in for like an upcoming release that were equally as awesome, and everybody knew the words. Our PA was like, plenty loud to communicate their vocals, but the audience was singing like every word so loud that it was like usurping the PA and band volume. It was like literally 200 people in unison, singing and sweating. There were people all around the stage, all around the band, like grabbing the microphones from band members to like sing things, and the band had just like the biggest smile on their face and just like dripping balls, in sweat. And these are like old dudes, and they were just like loving life, and ended up actually that night making one of the girls who like took the microphone away from the lead singer and like sung an entire song of his. They put out that girl's band's record, and it's the first release from all the Madmen records in over 15 years or something like that. Oh, man. As they became fans and friends of each other's music after that. Like, those type of connections really cool. are amazing, and those type of bands are few and far between in this kind of, rock star world of music. But this place seems to get a lot of just like super grounded, very agreeable punk rockers.
Yeah.
Through.
Yeah, Meebix played here. I've seen a lot of videos of his, and I didn't know quite what to expect. I think I was like had my guard up a little bit maybe, but he was super nice, and yeah, you did everything setting up the show for that.
Yeah, Nardwuar is a character, like his persona on the videos that you see isn't really too far of a cry from actual Nardwuar.
Yeah.
Like he had my cell phone number at one point, and he's that kind of neuroses that he exudes in this like very positive and very endearing way comes through in like his preparation for shows. Like he's very thorough and like advancing everything, and
he called the bar several times too.
Yeah, so he's that kind of neuroses, and was really fun and kind of energizing to work with. He keeps you on your toes, and his performance is awesome because he's one of those expert crowd manipulators. Like he can get a reaction from maybe some curmudgeonly person who like reluctantly got dragged to the show, and next thing you know, they're like the biggest Evaporators Nardwuar fan ever, and helping hold him and his flying keyboard up so that he can surf around. So working with people like that is always really fun, and he was like very gracious when like our door guy's like taking photos, and he's like, I'll do the Nardwuar like freeze thing, and then you can do it, and then like we'll both be doing that together, and then like Dave will get a picture of it, and he was like, yeah, that's a great idea, and just kind of that type of enthusiasm is really contagious. So it's awesome. He's actually been here a couple of times now, and every time total pleasure. Yeah, hopefully he'll be back.
Cutting loose, he's drinking juice. Pretty sure that he's out of his fucking